The armory was quiet at dusk, lit only by the thin orange line of sunset cutting through the narrow window. Corporal Mara Vance preferred it that way. Most soldiers rushed through weapons cleaning after a long field day, but she worked slowly, deliberately, as if each rifle whispered a story that could only be heard if treated with respect. She sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, patches and brushes neatly arranged around her like a surgeon's tools. She was halfway through reassembling an M110 when the door creaked open. Heavy boots, confident steps, someone who believed he owned whatever space he walked into. Mara didn't look up immediately. "Well, I'll be damned," a man's voice said. Didn't know they were letting support staff handle precision rifles now. Mara clicked the upper receiver into place before responding. "I'm not support staff." The man stepped forward into the light, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered sniper with a scruffy beard and a smirk that had probably gotten him punched more than once. Sergeant Kellen Reed, she recognized him instantly. His reputation in the unit was almost mythic. One of the few with confirmed extreme distance hits. Someone who carried ego the way others carried rucksacks. He folded his arms. "You're Vance, right? New transfer. Heard you requested to work on long-range platforms." His eyes traveled over her setup. "Didn't think you'd be this tiny. And yet somehow," she said calmly, "the rifles still behave." Kellen laughed, a low, amused rumble. "All right then. Tell me, what's the furthest shot you've ever been behind?" Mara slid the bolt carrier in with gentle precision. 3,100 meters. He blinked. 3,100. Accidentally send one downrange during a windstorm. She didn't rise to the bait. Suppression exercise in Afghanistan. Target confirmation from a recon drone. Kellen raised a brow, unconvinced. "Anyone can claim numbers." Mara finally met his gaze. "Numbers don't concern me. Hits do." He stared at her for a long second, then his smirk sharpened. "Fine. If you're as good as you think you are." He reached behind him, knocking on the frame of a massive Pelican case leaning against the wall. "I've got my custom .408 Chadak in here. Best rifle on base. Tomorrow, 0600, North Ridge. I set the target. You take the shot." Mara's hands stilled. "A challenge. A demonstration," Kellen corrected. "You say you're capable. I say you need to prove it. And if you can hit what I set," he gave a small, mocking salute. "I'll admit I misjudged you." She thought for a moment before nodding once. "All right." The next morning, the wind cut across the ridge in icy gusts, carrying the smell of dust and pine. The sun had barely crested the horizon, but the snipers were already gathered. Word traveled fast in units like theirs. Mara walked calmly toward them, sleeves rolled, hair tied in a tight braid. Kellen stood beside his rifle, adjusting the optics. "You're late," he said. "It's 0558, she replied. 2 minutes early." He grinned despite himself. "Fair enough." A specialist handed Mara a data card, showing the target, a steel plate the size of a dinner tray placed precisely 3,800 meters away, far past standard operational distances. At that range, even the planet's curvature played games. Mirage, wind drift, humidity, spin drift, Coriolis, all of it mattered. Some soldiers muttered under their breath. "No way. That's beyond extreme. She'll miss by a kilometer." Mara knelt beside the rifle without acknowledging any of them. She inspected the bipod, the cheek rest, the suppressor's threading, the torque on every screw. Then she settled behind the scope. "Your dope is in inches," Kellen said. "I left nothing out. No tricks. And wind markers?" she asked. "Staggered flags at various intervals. Same as any extreme distance challenge." Mara inhaled, slow and steady. She adjusted elevation by more clicks than some rifles even possessed. The world narrowed to a single line. Her breath, the reticle, the distant plate glinting in the low sun. "You can back out," Kellen offered. "This isn't a normal shot." She didn't respond. She checked wind drift again, 4 separate gust layers, each acting differently. She adjusted half a mil to compensate for the subtle left-to-right push near the target. "Shooter ready," she murmured. Kellen's amusement faded into something more serious. "Spotter ready." Her finger brushed the trigger, a light, familiar touch. She exhaled the second half of her breath and the rifle thundered. The entire ridge seemed to hold its breath as the round sliced through air most people never thought about, climbing, arcing, fighting gravity the entire way. The flight time was long enough for a full sentence. Long enough for doubt. Long enough for every watching soldier to shift uneasily. 4 seconds. 5. 6. Then, a faint, distant clang echoed back across the valley. Mara didn't smile, didn't move. She simply blinked once. The soldiers exploded in murmurs. No freaking way. She hit that. At that range. That's impossible. Kellen stared through the spotting scope, silent. When he finally stepped back, his expression was stripped of all arrogance. That shouldn't be possible, he whispered. At that distance. With that wind. That's a world record class shot. Mara stood and brushed dust from her knee. The rifle is solid, she said. You built it well. He tore his gaze from the scope, looking at her as though seeing her for the first time. Who trained you? Different people, she replied. Different places. That's not an answer. She met his eyes, calm and steady. Not one you need. For the first time since arriving at the unit, she saw genuine respect in the faces around her. Not the grudging acknowledgement women in military environments were often forced to settle for, but respect earned by skill no one could dismiss. One of the snipers muttered, "She's better than half the instructors at Bragg." "Better than most of them," another corrected. Kellen stepped forward. The man who had swaggered into the armory the night before was gone. In his place stood a sniper who knew exactly what he had witnessed, and what it meant. He offered a crisp, formal salute. "Mara Vance," he said quietly, "you're the best long-range shooter I've ever seen. And I don't say that lightly." She returned the salute, soft but precise. "Thank you, Sergeant." The snipers around them stood in stunned silence as the wind tugged at their uniforms. Kellen exhaled, still processing. "You know, most people spend decades trying to master shots like that." "I just see the math," she said simply. "Math," he repeated, shaking his head with a disbelieving laugh. Mara turned to leave, already thinking of the armory, of the rifles waiting for cleaning. She didn't need applause or theatrics. She never had. Behind her, Kellen called out, "One more thing." She paused. "If you ever want a spotter," he said, "you've got one." She gave a faint nod before walking down the ridge, her steps steady, unhurried, as the gathered snipers watched her go, no longer doubting, no longer mocking, but wondering what kind of legend had just quietly revealed herself among them.